Welcome to the Hardwood Time Capsule Podcast presented by Callaway Golf. Our platform brings you, the Hoops fan, deep inside the playing careers and personal lives of past players and coaches in Australian basketball. From World Championships to Olympics to the adversity of careers cut short, we explore it all direct with the players themselves. I'm John Casey. Here's your host, Andrew O'Brien.
G'day Hoops fans, this episode we have an all-time fan favourite, a real personality of the NBL in the 90s and 2000s. From the dairy farms of Western Victoria to a four-time NBL champion over 500 games. Enjoy our chat with a very entertaining Paul Rees.
Mr. Paul Rees, welcome to the podcast.
No worries, Andrew. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Obviously, for a lot of the listeners and myself, a big part of sort of growing up and going to the basketball and watching the basketball regardless of what team you went for. Played in multiple states over more than 1,000 games, so hell of a lot of basketball. But what we always start this podcast with, Paul, is I guess a bit of a where are they now? So what we might get you to do is sort of fill us in. You've got a lot of Vegemite memorabilia there behind you, so I'm assuming you work for a company that's something to do with Vegemite, but I'll let you take it from here. Where in Australia do we find you, and what are you doing for work?
Okay, so today you find me in Adelaide. I work for Bega, and so one of the brands in our portfolio is Vegemite, and so I'm in one of the Vegemite rooms. So here at work. So and what I do, I buy milk off dairy farmers across Australia in the role that I've got with the company. So I'm based here in Adelaide, and I grew up on a dairy farm and, got into it and, love the industry, love the people. There's always something different going on. Not all that always good, but it is what it is. That's life. So,
Were you affected by the pandemic in what you do?
Not really. Pandemic was great for us. We didn't have to run around for kids' sport and that sort of thing. So I need to be mindful of all the people who are massively negatively affected. But for our little family unit, no impact. Oh, did it mean I could fly around and see farmers in other states? Because the breadth of where I buy milk from and involved with is guys that I work with is Far North Queensland, Malanda. Just got off the phone with Howard Smith that I work with up there, and all the way across to WA and down to Tassie. So it meant I didn't travel, but also meant, we didn't do kids sport, and we, hung out at home, and we've had four kids at home. We were fortunate during the pandemic, and it was a great family time for us.
Yeah. So is the Bega work something you've done since playing retirement, or was there stuff in between?
So, back in '94, when the Giants went broke, I ended up with a side hustle in a trophy business. And when I eventually finished playing, I thought I'd expand that into, a full-time role, just become the trophy king of Australia. Imaginatively named it Paul Rees Trophies. A bit after Dick Smith as an inspiration, but after about 6 months with that, it was building slowly, but I wasn't passionate to be full time in it. And fortunately, when I was playing with the 36ers here in Adelaide, I'd done some part-time work with the company, and through that part-time work, one of the old bosses reached out to me and said, "Hey, notice you've retired. There's a job going with what was then National Foods. Not saying you'll get it, but if you're interested, you should apply for it." So I applied for that job and won the role, which was great, because I had watched all my savings from basketball going dum, 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 as I was trying to aspire to be this trophy king. And so my first paycheck, we bought a new barbecue and a fridge. So with 3 kids at home.
Look, we'll touch on that. You've obviously mentioned the brooding family that you've got now sort of on their way towards adulthood and entering into adulthood. But for the listeners, some of those in Adelaide might be aware, but for those that aren't in Adelaide, you got a fair bit of basketball talent there. Do you want to run us through what the kids are up to at the moment?
Yeah. So I think you could say there's a bit of talent there for them. Basketball's always been a big part of my life, and it's continued to be a big part of their life. We didn't push our kids into basketball. Darcy, our eldest, probably didn't start playing till quite late relative to a lot of others. But then it all just sort of folded in. It was I butchered that, but you might have to edit that bit out, But so we've got 4 kids. They've all played basketball. Currently, Darcy, our eldest child, she completed 5 years at the University of Washington in Seattle. It was an incredible experience to be part of her journey to where she is currently, and she's at the moment over in the UK playing for the University of Essex in the British League, and enjoying a world experience, and hopefully achieving her masters as part of that 12 months over there. So then we've got Kelsey. She's currently at the Oregon State University on a scholarship there, and having just finished 3 years where she got a double degree at the University of Utah, and had an incredible experience there where they went from not being into the NCAA tournament for many years to her second year. They made the second round, and last year they made the Sweet 16. So, so she's furthering her basketball journey over at OSU, and so they're about to get started over there. And our third daughter, Marnie, she's recently moved over to Central Maine Community College over near Boston, and on the far side of the US. And so they played one of their first games last night, and she had 3 points and 8 rebounds, and and it seems to be really relishing it over there. So
you mentioned on our pre-podcast chat that she's her school was less than 5 kilometres from the massacre the other week. It's
absolutely. So of all the places in the States that they could have a mass shooting, Marnie ended up being 5K from the bowling alley, and had been to the bowling alley, a month ago. So, so that was a bit confronting for her, and it affected quite a few of the girls for a little bit. But she's she's cracking on with it now, and it is what it is, So world experience. So,
no, it sounds like they've travelled far and wide. Were you involved with their coaching back in Australia as they were growing up, or your life?
Not really. The club side where they played, they didn't encourage, parents to necessarily, coach their kids if they're in Div 1 or 2. So the girls are in Div 1 or 2 most of the way through. We've also got a young man these days, Mason, as our youngest child.
Yep.
And so I did actually coach him in last year in under 18s. So as a coach, I'm kind of, I don't know, coaching my own child. I think it was probably negative for him a little bit, because if I had 2 kids, I didn't want to hurt the other kids' feelings, so he'd sit on the bench beside mine, because I'm pretty big on nepotism being a bloody disaster. But has it worked for some families? I guess it has. But I don't like it. So I think if it's their journey. Do you know what I mean? I've done what I've done. My wife's done what she's done in basketball, and she was a very good basketball player in her own right.
Yes, Nicole, right?
Yeah, Nicole. So, but they've got to want to do it, I'm pleased the kids have got into basketball. My dad once said about basketball, even if you're rubbish on a rubbish team, you've still got to run up and down, you know? Whereas Aussie rules football, if you're rubbish on a rubbish team as a junior and you're getting flogged, you might stand down one end of the ground and just stand there next to the bloke next to you going, Jesus, isn't this a great day? You know, and it's raining sideways. There's no fitness in it. Do you know what I mean? So, but yeah. So no, I think basketball's been great, and it's certainly been kind to our family, and it's still got further to go. So,
Yeah.
and
No, it's great that you're encouraging them and helping them in it. It is a bit of a fine line, I guess, because as a lot of listeners on this podcast will relate, it's one of those things when you're in clubs in juniors and that some clubs have sort of firm rules on parents not coaching and sort of having a non-bias parent, but then at the same time, it depends who you've got as parents. If you've got someone, with 20 years experience in professional basketball, has got a hell of a lot of wealth and knowledge and can fast track the development of players. That's another thing. So it's always that juggling act, I think, for coaching directors or for teams and those sort of things. And it depends, I guess, on your mindset as well. Like we've had players in here that have, said it's really difficult to step away because they're used to having control when they were playing. And then others that, to be honest, were almost burnt out and really just went along as a parent and didn't want anything more to do with basketball after that because I guess it had been their life for so long. So I guess it's all personal experience, really.
Everyone's different. So, and I guess you've got to, the few times I have coached kids, we lived in Tasmania for a few years as part of this role. We were down there for 4 years and I couldn't be more grateful. I mean, I left basketball and wanted to do something else a little bit. People have asked me, could you have assistant coached or whatever? And potentially I could have, but I had a reasonable number of kids. I didn't want to sit on a assistant coach's wage for 4 or 5 years. Who knows? So and I also wanted to explore other passions of mine and certainly and see where the world would take me outside of basketball. Where you go, oh, you've been successful in basketball because you're 6'9", not for no other reason. Yet some of the most successful basketballers are not 6'9". Do you know what I mean? You don't have to be tall to play this game. No. So as part of the journey, working life, I'd been working for National Foods for 2 years, and they said, listen, you can move to Tasmania and take up a role down there, or you can find yourself another job. And so we took a chance as a family and moved to northern Tasmania, and we had 4 kids at the time, and I can't thank my wife enough. And it was an incredibly brave move for her, to move there. And I can't imagine my life without having lived in Penguin on the north coast of Tasmania. If you want to talk about sporting hubs, sport is just the lifeblood of that region. Whether it's football, whether it's basketball, and basketball is a big part of that. It gets so much opportunity in the local media and that sort of thing, and that's where our kids started playing at Penguin basketball. So so down there, and I'm not sure where we were going with that question, Andrew.
Yeah, no, that's okay. No, I was just wondering, sort of obviously where it all ties back in, because one of my questions with everyone that's played elite basketball, professional basketball, is sort of how they give back. Are they still involved, that sort of thing? But we can see, obviously, with what you mentioned about Tasmania, especially with the Jackies now, it's a bit of a fortress down there. You can see your passion for it, and it's probably going to be a little bit like the need to build a bigger basketball stadium is because when we look at the record crowds, in the NBL, obviously most of them are up at in Sydney at Kudos Bank Arena, but there's nothing to say that during your championship runs with the Adelaide 36ers that you guys wouldn't have got 17,000 if you could have, but the reality was you just couldn't. You can't fit them in. So we'll get to your pro career very soon, because I know people will be keen to talk about that, and I've sent through a few questions for you as well. But before we get to that, obviously we see you when you come onto the scene. For you, it was with the Brisbane Bullets and then across to North Melbourne. But where did it all start? Did you start like real young, like under 8s, under 10s, or were you a late bloomer?
No.
How did it all start?
It all started, I grew up in Western Victoria in a small country town called Terang. My parents operated a dairy farm down there, and pardon me, I started playing in, I think, year 8 at school in the local Nurut butter factory. And as it turns out, if you Google it right now, you can buy the local Nurut Butter Factory where they played basketball down there. And it was a great experience. And, basketball had some street cred at the school I went to, which was great. And that's where it started. But it also meant that, growing up in the country like that you're exposed to adults very early. Being fairly tall, so I played juniors, and it was just juniors and adults. That's it. So, you're quickly filling in if you've got a bit about you. And I played for rep ball for Tim Boone in C grade country league down in Melbourne. Once a year they went down to that because Terang didn't have a rep team as such, and Tim Boone was a smaller town, which was where I was born. So I represented for them a couple of times when I was in high school, and it was a great time. And,
did you have a hoop at home or anything that the old man had put up?
I actually in metalwork built my own hoop. So I'm not sure if I got an A, B, or C for it, but we put it up on the end of the shed, and that's what we had. So you could go in and bloody climb up the wall a little bit and dunk it and that sort of jazz. So plenty of dynabolts holding that sucker in, and so I did that, and played with my mates and really enjoyed it. Played a little bit down in Warrnambool a few times during year 12, and I was fortunate down there that Bill Tomlinson, and I've been very fortunate, for the people I've been exposed to and helped me on my journey. So Bill Tomlinson was, as it turned out, was the Bulleen Boomers coach in Melbourne, and he married a Warrnambool girl. So he did a free clinic in Warrnambool when I was in year 12. And, heard on the grapevine, someone invited me to go down to it, went to it. And after the clinic, Bill said, "Hey, if you're ever in Melbourne, look me up, and I'll get you a game of basketball." Yep. So I finished year 12, moved to Melbourne, got a job in the Commonwealth Bank, and looked up Bill, and then went from, being in the second team under 20s for Bulleen to and also playing Div 5 my first year down there, playing Div 2 as well, and training with Div 1 because I was tall and had a crack, and under 20, so playing socially on a Sunday as well. As it turned out, I played socially on a Sunday with Darren Lucas. Not even sure if he remembers it.
Where was that at?
Out at Bulleen, Templestowe, sort of thing. So, and the first Americans, I was exposed to at Bulleen was Cecil Exum, Carlos Kelly, and Cecil moved on the year after that, and then Willie Genetti came in, and but I was also exposed to some guys that had played, NBL in the really early days, Alan Mick or Gary Favreau, and they were just great role models. As a tall kid from the country, I probably stooped a lot. They were constantly onto me to bloody stand up straighter, that sort of thing. And just that city exposure. We had a guy named Johnny Pappas who was the team manager, a little bloke with tats and that sort of thing. He was the coolest unit going around. He constantly said, "I would like to get you in a phone box, Reese, and just work you," because with my big levers, I couldn't swing nothing in a phone box. And for all those younger people watching today, they probably don't understand what a phone box is. Google it, you'll work it out. So I was lucky, Bill took basketball seriously. He was a plumber at the time. Basketball was his side gig. I doubt he was getting paid, coaching the Bulleen Boomers. If he was, it wouldn't have been much. And look where he's gone on. He's coached at the NBL level. He's coached in China. He's a career coach. His son is now a career coach too over in the States. Absolutely, Nate over in the States. I've been very lucky with those who I've been exposed to. So
I guess with the way you played, Paul, obviously maybe not so much back in those days, but 6'9", doesn't cut it as a centre always in all leagues around the world, and same as Andrew Gaze in terms of not having extreme athleticism. You had to learn how to use your body and things like that. Was there Was it Bill, or was there someone that sort of taught you how to use your body, or you just figured it out? You were just tough. Was there
Well,
anything?
Bill was good at, don't bounce it in the key way, and I guess I'm a bit old school centre, I suppose, keep the ball high, if you rebound it, keep it up there, go back up, and different people over my journey, Rupert Sapwell at the Sixers have certainly commented a lot to me that, well, you do a good job keeping the ball up, Rees, I guess, and that's where that teaching came in through Bill. And then, from there, I ended up in the Brisbane Bullets, and, Brian
What was
Curl
the
was the head
connection there?
coach. So, I don't know how. Well, I think Bill possibly through basketball's all connected, and Bill put a good word in for me with Brian Curl. I went from moving from the country, second team Bulleen under 20s. Second year, didn't get invited out for the state under 20 tryouts. My first year in Melbourne, and the second year I made the team. So, and that was I guess it was some kid that had been going through bloody underage all the way through, going, well, what happened here? Where'd this kid come from? And so we won the under 20s in Maroochydore that year, and Brian Curl came and watched me play, and I'm sure plenty of others. And from there, he offered me a contract, but said, you know what, you need to keep playing. You need runs on the board. You stay in Victoria where you're playing VBA, you're playing Seabull, you're playing in different divisions. Stay down there and keep playing. And in fact, Barry Barnes, who I was exposed to as well, was coaching at wherever he was, and he said, I can recruit you to Geelong, but I think you need to play another year in Seabull, just getting reps and game time. So so I played another year down in Melbourne, and didn't move to the NBL till I was 21. So that's where so many people I talk to today, it's like, oh, I'm never going to make it. I'm 20 years old. I've been a development player, and you go, well, and that's why, you just go, well, are you never going to make it? Have you just not, had the right opportunity? Have you, do you know what I mean? So, and look at Aaron Bruce. I don't follow it too well, but he was here in Adelaide, and I had a chat with him, I reckon, and one night at the end of the 36ers, and look at the career he's had since he left here. I'm pretty sure he wasn't a young man when he got to the Sydney Kings. He spent his fair share of hard yards, so I'm really pleased for him to watch him and watch what they've done.
No, that is an important lesson, because we have had a little bit like yourself, that if you persevere, like you mentioned with that, you might have taken someone who was up the top in the juniors all the way through, and then all of a sudden you've come along, because it is that crossroads. We had Mick Hill, who played at the Bullets, on, and he didn't go pro until 23. We had Stephen Hoare, who was on, who was in the under 18 fours for Bulleen, and didn't make a first team until under 20s. But it is that age as well. We see Ben Eyre now, who's really flourishing at 26 or 27 years of age, because it is that mix, and you've probably noticed even more so with your daughters, because it happens, I think, a little bit more in female basketball, is that when it gets to that age where you get your license, you can go out all of a sudden, you can go get a job. There's this real changing of who thinks they can make it, who really wants to make it, and then who just drops off. So from a lot of people consider under 18 top age, like that's the end of their juniors, and it dwindles down at under 20s.
Honestly, I encourage my girls to go overseas, go to college. I think it's a great gap year. I think, I'm disappointed in adults that are playing these days that, if you're paying me for money to play, I'm trying to crush the next 18-year-old. And at 18, you haven't done the yards in terms of experience or unless you're an elite talent. For most people, you haven't got a mature body. I think, the NBL, the WNBL should be for bloody women and men. And unless you're elite at 19, I think too many think that they're elite, but they're not. Go somewhere, go to college, don't stress about not being a starter, and just go get some runs on the board and improve your body so you can compete with adults. So there's a real, hey, we got the next new thing coming through that's 17. You go, have you though?
Yeah,
You know,
isn't it? It's so
have you?
competitive. Yeah,
You know,
and that's
what
a
about
great.
the 23-year-old?
Yeah,
Let's get them going.
100%. That's a great segue to your first year with Brisbane, because you end up going to the finals as a team.
Yep.
You go up against, and this is exactly what you're just talking about, going from boys to playing against men. The almighty Perth Wildcats in that era were, we're talking real big men like Scott Fisher, Vlahov, big
Oh,
units.
they Scott hadn't got there quite yet, but
Right, okay.
I'm pretty sure they had
Was
James
it Pin?
Crawford and
Yeah,
Tiny Pinder
yeah,
and that sort of thing.
yes,
And
yeah,
and as you say, adults. I think they
yeah,
had Hanson or someone like that, but they were
yeah.
big units.
Big,
So
yeah,
and I mean Andre Moore, who I played with at Brisbane,
yeah,
honestly, and we had Robert Sibley, who was a strong unit, and
yeah.
mate, I couldn't do a chin up when I got to the NBL, So,
Was
so
it a
I
bit
had,
of a
I
shock
had a
in
lot of
general?
enthusiasm, but I
Yeah,
was bouncing left and right. I got to tell you, I didn't get any weight about me until I was about 24. So
right. So you were sort of a beanpole kind of.
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, and we had a great weights guy up at Brisbane Bullets who I did a lot of negative stuff. So if you can't do a chin up, you just got to lower yourself, slowly,
Yeah,
and still get
yeah,
get an effect. But
yeah. The old eccentric chin-ups. Yeah,
yeah, so no, it was good, and I was lucky to that level of professionalism. It was incredible to go from the Bullying Boomers, and I was working full time. So I
yeah,
worked at the Commonwealth Bank for 3 years and 3 days, and to go up to Brisbane and have a professional weights program, have
yeah,
Kingy knew his stuff, and he was a
yeah,
hard man,
yeah,
and yeah, so that was great, and even then, yeah, it was semi-professional. I still on a Monday morning got up and worked at the Brisbane fruit markets as a storeman packer.
yeah. Right.
So I was
Yeah,
up at bloody 3:30, clocking on at 4,
yeah,
and working through till 2:30 or so.
yeah.
The only regret I had there was I once sent all Brussels sprouts to like some poor joint in Gilgandra or somewhere in the middle of New South Wales. There must have been kids everywhere going, "Where's the broccoli? This is all Brussels sprouts." Well, it's all they got in the shop, sweetheart.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
But
Do
yeah,
you
no,
mind?
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's good. So, it was a great time in Brisbane. The Brisbane Bullets was something. That was Monday morning. Tuesday morning was I worked for B105, the radio station, driving one of those Black Thunder trucks that they used to have back in the day. Giving away stuff.
Yeah,
So again, and still training full time for the Bullets. In the evenings and afternoons.
yeah.
So, good.
Do you
Good
mind me
times.
asking what your first pay packet was for Brisbane?
I think it
Because
was about 10. It was 10 grand in accommodation.
okay, that's
So,
not bad.
and they gave you money for food on the road too. So I actually
Yeah,
saved more money in a year than I'd saved, for 3 years working for a living in bloody Victoria in the
yeah,
Commonwealth Bank. So,
yeah,
so no, it
yeah.
was interesting. And then bang, I had a good year, and they kept me on, and it went from 10 to I think 24 or something like that. So yeah,
Okay,
no,
we've certainly heard worse on here. We've had some that said that yeah, the minimum was $1 for just to be on the roster. So we've had everything from $1
yep, yeah,
to extraordinary amounts. But obviously, you transitioned into where I first caught glance of you personally, being a Melbourne kid and born in the late
yep.
'80s, is down to Glasshouse and the North Melbourne Giants. Who recruits you, and what, was it just
Um,
that you wanted to come home, or was it a better opportunity?
well, I got to the end of my third year in Brisbane, and I was playing behind Andre Moore, and Bruce Palmer left the Giants coaching and got the job in Brisbane, and so and he was keeping Andre Moore, so I then had to choose. I went on the open market because, as a young Australian centre, you can't be behind an American centre because, there's always pressure to play the guys who get the most money. you know. So Andre was a better player than me, you know, so I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing the hard yards another year behind Dre. You know, he's got preferential treatment as the import. I'm going to go somewhere else. I want to have that opportunity to work hard and get the reward, but I'm not going to get it behind an American centre. So I was talking to Townsville and to go up there. And I talked to the Gold Coast to go down there, which would have kept me in the Sunshine State. You know, I was building a relationship with my wife and, you know, my future wife, Nicole. So it was a real attraction to stay up there. But Brett Brown recruited me down to the Giants. So they, you know, they offered the most money of the three of them. And, you know, in terms of development, he offered the most in terms of VBA on a Wednesday night, you know, just added all the games extra that you could play. And VBA, I'd imagine still is a great league down in Melbourne or not, I don't know. But at the time, the NBL teams played in the VBA very strongly. So, so he offered more competition, you know, a fresh face, a fresh voice, and the most money. So, you know, I once said to Rupert Sapwell in the change rooms at the 36ers, I said, Sapper, as I look back, I tend to have always played for the team that paid the most. Does that make me a bad person or a tramp? I'm not sure. I like the term mercenary. So, but yeah, so that's what got me back down there. And Brett said, hey, there'll be you and Larry Senstock fighting for the 5 spot. And we're bringing in a guy named Chucky White in the 4 spot. He's an American. And Chuck got in there and travelled every time he caught it and was a lovely bloke, but just didn't make the transition from out of the NBL into the NBL. And so we ended up with Jason Rees. And so my first year wasn't what I thought it was going to be in Melbourne. But Brett was an amazing coach for me in terms of just fundamentals and, you know, expanding my mind around what I could or couldn't do in terms of no limits. So I'd gone on a tour with the Bullets where they invited Andre Lafleur. And so at a practice, you know, in Auchenflower in Brisbane, you know, we're going through our warm-up and Andre's dribbling with 2 balls. And I'm looking over at him going, oh, my God, that's why he's the point guard, because I can barely dribble the one I got, let alone a second one, you know. And so get down there with Brett and he goes, right, we're going to start every session with 2-ball dribbling. And you wouldn't believe it. If you actually pound the balls low into the ground, it's kind of easy, you know. But, hey, little magic trick there for everybody, you know. So, yeah. So, and just step backs, going left, going right, you know. Yeah. So Brett was great for me, and just shooting and getting some range.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when you just look at the success that you had, and obviously the confidence and self-belief that you had in yourself to come and really take over. You win the championship in 1994. Not only that, but you beat the Sixers and you win the grand final MVP, averaging a tick over 18 points per game in terms of that. So I guess, you know, it all makes sense when you're tying the belief that you had, the ability or the green light to really sort of go for it. What do you remember of that series, Paul?
Yeah, no, it's a funny one. Yeah, I got MVP for that series. But if I was to pick a point in the finals that I really felt I best helped the team was the last game against the Magic, you know, in the last quarter. Right. And it was close. It was going down to the wire. And I was sitting on the bench going, Jesus, this is tight. I'm pleased I'm here and not out there. And then Paul Maley and Larry Senstock got into foul trouble and I had to go on. And you know, it might have been my day up until then, but it was my moment. Mark Leader and I both had a great final 5 or 6 minutes run down to the wire and we knocked over those guys in a close one. And yeah,
that'd be like John Dodge and
it was against Dodgy, Bruce Bolden, all those guys. You know, Brian Gorgian coach team, that sort of thing. So just get that game and go into the grand final was something else, and I felt I was a real contributor, having been sitting on the bench going, I don't want to be a contributor. That's something I'll never forget. But fast forwarding into the grand final series against Adelaide, I felt I had a solid series. I'm pretty sure there's a bit of conjecture around who should have got it, but we had DMAC, just a great player. They had Robert Rose, an incredible player, but I have a recollection of the game two, leading up to half time, and I got an offensive board and put it back, and it just felt like the wind went out of those guys a little bit on that play, and that's what I remember of that game. And then we just sort of got rolling, and I don't know that people give that team enough credit. The North Melbourne Giants that year, you just run through it. We were adults. There was no child stars on that team. We had DMAC as the point guard. We had Mark Leader, who was an incredible leader of men, not just his namesake. We had Daryl Pearce, Hall of Famer, an incredible three-point shooter. We had Larry Senstock again. They've named a medal after the man. We had Paul Maley at his best. We had Pat Reedy, an Australian player, an incredible junior going through the journey. We had Rod Johnson, just a hard playing, partying individual, that I lived with that year, and I couldn't keep up. But anyway, that's another story. So, the list just goes on and on. Matty Shanahan, who you've had on, was down the end of the bench, and look what a player he was over the journey, So John Stelzer was in there, That was a team of adults, barring Matty Shanahan, that got the NBL, championship.
Yeah.
So
did you find you had great chemistry overall in terms of, like, some players, for instance, will come on here and go, we were successful because, like we knew each other off the court as well. Like, we're a close-knit team. Andrew Bogut talks about that with the Golden State Warriors. Others say we just knew our role really well. And so we knew each other on the court, what was expected, that sort of thing. What was the feel there with that group?
I think we had a real good chemistry that year. But, I mean, you fast forward 2 years from then, I think we had just as good a chemistry, and we were terrible on the court. We got on famously off the court, but we just couldn't seem to get it together on the court. But it was a different makeup of individuals as well. But, that team had chemistry and great players. So
Yep. No, that's some hell of a names you just dropped there. And when you think about it, it's it'd be difficult to get all those players, I guess, without them being willing to have roles, because when you consider if they were on their own team, they could very well make an argument for how many times a game they touch the ball and yada yada.
Yeah, no, exactly. So no, and I was learning all the time from those guys. And since this is a podcast and you tell stories, I was at practice with Daryl Pearce. As I said, Hall of Famer, that sort of thing. And we were doing a shooting session at the old Albert Park, and afterwards I walked over and I said, "Ice," and that was his nickname, Iceman. You got any tips for me, as a young bloke trying to, improve his shooting and that sort of thing? And I was really hoping for aim for the back of the ring, Paul, breathe out as you shoot, something tangible I could do. And he's gone, "Well, Reese, when I used to get home from school, I'd go out in the backyard and I'd shoot for 3 hours." And, I'm like, that's not it, mate. That's not it. That's not what I was looking for. Hard work was not the option I was looking for. But anyway, but yeah, no. And, I've been exposed to some great players and some hard workers, and I wish I'd worked a little bit harder myself, but I made those choices, and I don't think people, own those choices enough. But like the very next year, mailman Paul Maley hurt his back, and we had Chris Gent. And he was a fantastic bloke and an incredible competitor. And potentially, if you weren't his teammate, you weren't a big fan of his, because, he was a gun. and sometimes I'd suggest he's be in the conversation of, one and done players that played in the NBL and were great. So, and he was the first to practice. He was getting up threes. He aspired to go back and play in the NBA, and he was the first to get there, last to leave. And and I reached out to him last year after 28 years, and I said to my family, I'm a bit embarrassed bringing up Chris because he's the assistant coach at the Lakers, and we were doing a family holiday to see the kids over in the States. And, I'm not sure how he'll respond, and Marnie, my third daughter, goes, Dad, you haven't talked to me in 26 years. If he responds badly, what's it going to matter? Yeah. And I've got to say, he responded brilliantly, and it was like time had kind of stood still, and he was just great. And I can't thank him enough for getting us a few tickets to watch the Lakers and see LeBron in action. And I wished I could have caught up with him, but, the NBA is its own beast, and there's a few requirements there. And, combine that with trying to entertain a family, we just couldn't actually physically touch each other. But yeah, it was great to catch up with him over this sort of environment and have a few laughs. And it was brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I think the principle in that is that sport often does create bonds that are lasting a lifetime, regardless of how long you've been around someone. Just before we move you on to going and playing for the Adelaide 36ers in the late 90s, 1998. When you came back to Melbourne, did you seek work then?
When I came back to Melbourne from the Bullets?
Yeah.
No. I was getting reasonably well paid, and it was pretty cool. And that was the thing, I did go back to study in that second year in 94, and I felt it gave me balance, I'll be honest with you. It was because you weren't constantly thinking about basketball. And, so that and playing PlayStation with Rod Johnson and,
You obviously come across as someone who's, you know what you're doing with your finances. You're pretty switched on when it comes to where opportunities are and aren't. Did you have a manager or an agent at this time, or were you doing it yourself?
I did at that time, and then I figured I could do it myself a few years later. Brian Curl helped me out, and he had a solicitor mate, and so they helped with me getting the contract together for the North Melbourne Giants. And since we're telling stories, after I got that MVP, and God bless, the guys who voted for me, because the accountant of the Giants apparently said to someone, that's going to cost us money, So,
did you have an incentive in there, did you?
No, but I was coming out of contract, so and so it was a funny one because I really wanted to stay, and I love the guys, didn't want to go anywhere, and so I said to Brett, get the club to put something to me, I want to sign, I want to stay here, and so Brett's like, no, and the club's like, no, you put something to us, and then so we put something to the club. And then after practice, a week or so later, Brett comes to me and he goes, Paul, can I speak to you? And he takes me aside and in whispered tones, he goes, do you know what you've asked for? I go, I do. And he goes, we can't afford that. I said, I didn't think you could, but you insisted I put to you guys what I would like. And you know what? I would like all that. And I said, so you know what? Tell the club to come back to me with something they want to pay me, So and I stayed. So
that's pretty funny. Cool. I mean, they asked the question.
they said,
So we'll keep on the move just because we've got quite a few Adelaide fans that have written in when I mentioned that you were coming on and brought up which I wasn't aware of, but the Paul Rees posse.
All right. That was a crew.
T-shirts made up, and they said they got a massive thrill if you'd hit a 3-pointer and point to them, and they love that. But tell us, I guess, why the move to Adelaide and how you found, because when you mentioned before some big names for the Giants, you were when Phil Smythe came in and recruited a team, you ended up in a pretty loaded team when it comes to names. So fill us in on that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So I was, we'd finished a bit average, 97. I hurt my PCL that year and didn't play too many games. And I guess I'll get to that, but I'll keep going. I'll stay on topic. And so at the end of the 97 year, Steve Breeny was being recruited. He went to Adelaide. So, and he was the assistant coach at the Giants. And so it was after the season, I was at my wife's family's house. They'd all gone to bed. It was Saturday night. I was watching Drop Zone, Wesley Snipes and the crew, Nick Nolte, I think it was. Anyway, I was watching Drop Zone in the lounge room and the house phone rang because it was, so I dashed out there to grab it because I knew everyone else was in bed, and it was Brett Brown. I don't know how he got that number, but anyway, it was Brett, and he goes, "Hey, Paul, you've got a year to run on your contract, but Adelaide's very interested in, getting you across there. And you know what? As long as they don't really go too hard at Ben Pepper, I'd really like Ben Pepper here. You know what? Happy to release you from your, your last year if that's the way you want to go." I was like, "Oh, well, I don't have to be told twice if you're prepared to release me." I clearly, again, going back, well, you're in the coaches, top 5, 6, 7 players that are going to play, and you sort of go, well, doesn't feel like I'm there anymore with Brett. So, yeah, so the 36ers are keen for me to play for them. I just pretty much moved my contract from there to there and extended it a little bit, so to give me the certainty to warrant moving to another team in another town. And so as of, Nikki and I, went to Adelaide, and it was a great team that they put together. So, I just had to do my role, fill in and that sort of thing. And really enjoyed Phil Smythe. So I needed the time, I think, under Brett for individuals and, that confidence around just being a professional and being able to have a manner of, I don't know, control over a lot of aspects of the game of basketball. But to then play for Phil and Steve over there, Phil was very much a player's coach. He wasn't as concerned about the degrees of your angle of your feet, when you're in the defensive slide. He was like, you know what, stay between your player and the ball, mate, or whatever, in the basket. So, and Phil was, about getting the best out of everybody individually and having a really positive environment. So, and he recruited people that were self-motivated. Do you know what I mean? And great players. Darnell Mee, Kevin Brooks, Brett Maher, Martin Catalini came into his own that year. I believe, he's already always shown a lot of promise, but under Phil, I think he blossomed as well. Mark Davis, was still getting it done. It was, the list went on. Scott Nennis. And that year we had Dean Brogan, who you had on the show, from what I can see. I probably left people out. Ruben Sapwell was there, of course. And John Riley. So what a team.
Yeah, it speaks to what you've just said. Speaks to what your other teammates that have been on have said about it as well. Brett said it was. Brett said when he was on, he's like, we were. Pretty much a team of all players that were matured and ready to go. He said, other than a few drills, we would scrimmage a hell of a lot at training, and we'd just be a team that was ready to go. And Dean Brogan said that's he left after that championship because he said I was thinking I was getting the power forward role, and then he said Catalini just kind of developed into this next level player that year, and I realised that maybe I wasn't going to get the time that I was promised because he just really developed in that time. One of the questions I have for you, Paul, regarding, and this is for the coaches that listen as well, is obviously you played with some incredible point guards and some incredible guards, and obviously you mentioned Brett Maher there, and D-Mac at the Giants.
Derek Rucker at the Bullets.
Rucker at the Bullets. I think he had 33 points average the season you played there, in one of the seasons you played there. How important is the chemistry between a point guard and a five-man when you consider on balls, when you consider not getting in each other's way, when you consider all those things? Did you ever have to problem solve with any point guards you were with, or was it just you found it quite easy?
Yeah, I mean, DMAC was brilliant. I mean, Derek is a scoring guard, not a, and I was young at that time, and I like to think I contributed, but nothing like I contributed over the journey. As I got stronger, older, and smarter about how I went about my business. But yeah, DMAC we talked about holding the ball up and keeping it up, mate. Just move without the ball with DMAC. He would draw your guy and find you. Boom. Darnell was much the same, and Darnell. There's a few. If you Google it, there's a few dunks kicking around where I'm just sort of, whoop, and Darnell's coming, boom. In terms of get out of the road. So get out of the road, clear a path, give him the opportunity to drive, and keep your man out of his path. So it was good. It was an incredible competitor, Darnell.
Yeah, we'd love to have him on at some point. When you mentioned before about going to Adelaide as a ready-made player and not worrying about the technicalities of footwork and all that sort of stuff in terms of individual and that.
Yep.
Sounds like you really did it in the right order, because perhaps if you'd gone there when you really needed Brett earlier on, it wouldn't have been there for you. So there might be something where, a player like yourself, not I don't know.
Is that luck? It wasn't management. It was just circumstance and a bit of luck, and people who've known me, I've been saying it for decades. I'd rather be lucky than good,
Yeah.
So,
but I think it also speaks to, when a young player gets an agent, probably maybe it'd be beneficial to get one that not only is going to get you the best deal, but really understands your game and goes, what's going to be the best situation for you right now? As opposed to the best deal. So no,
that's true. That's true. Because I mean, is this deal going to be the best deal you ever have in your life, or are you at a point where you're building to a better deal? And how do you build to that better deal? Is this the right place for you now to get that better deal? Is what you're saying. I don't disagree with what you're saying.
So I think it's important to have mentors a little bit like yourself, even if it's not a structured position, but just someone where if you stay involved enough, they're like, you know what, you're in your last year for SA Metro this year, maybe have a chat to Reesy about things, and those, or Brett Maher or someone like that. I think could be hugely beneficial. Now, while we're in Adelaide, obviously that whole period is very successful.
3 championships, 5 years, and the support we got, the Paul Rees posse, shout out. It was off the charts, and we were getting big crowds and playing some very attractive basketball. Now, I wasn't shooting a lot of threes, 17 years, 17 threes, so it means there was a few years there where I didn't make any. But it was a good time, and we had a good style about us, I think, that people could buy into. It was up and down. I don't think we got enough credit for the defense that led to that offense. In one of the grand final wins, I think Andrew Gaze or Steve Gaffino was like, I've never seen a team shoot so poorly but so confidently at the same time. But in that game, we were holding the Magic or the Titans or whoever they were, the Victorian team, to like 62. So which was and that's defense, and Phil gave us a freedom to miss. You can't be afraid, and I think that's one of the challenges I found as I got older. I was afraid of risk. I wanted to make a 2-footer always, so that I wouldn't miss. When the right play was probably a turnaround, fader or a hook shot and that sort of thing. And I think that's the challenge as you get older, for me anyway, was to continue to embrace risk and the right option as opposed to the safe option.
So That's incredible when you say 62 points, because back then we're still talking 48-minute games, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so
I
we're
lose
talking.
track. You know.
Yeah, but that's a long time. I mean, you don't hold them to 62 in 40-minute games, so that's pretty impressive. Now, obviously, you've had all this success in Adelaide at the time. Was there a time personally where you and Nicole go, you know what, we're actually gonna purchase a property, maybe, or we're gonna set up roots here? Was there any of that going on at the time, or?
Yeah, no, we bought a house in Adelaide, and I know this is going to sound foreign for anyone who knows me, but I actually went for a jog for part of pre-season, and ran along the beach, and there was a house for sale that day, and I went back and I said, "Hey, Nikki, I think you should go have a look at this house." We're about to renovate a house that we're already in, and it got passed in, and then the next day we bought a house at the beach in Adelaide, and so that's been a fair anchor to us because it's pretty cool. Much to my wife Nicole's distress, it's not the best house in the street. It's probably one of the worst, but you can't beat the view. And so we did that, and as you say, we had two kids. No, we hadn't had Darcy yet at that time, I think. Oh, we might have just had her. So yeah, it was about 2000, and I couldn't afford to move there now. You know, it's so we took a chance. You know, I spoke to my dad the next day. It'll stretch us, but yeah, we went for it, and a lot of my teammates they all thought I was crazy, but yeah. So then
I wish I bought a house in 2000. Nowadays,
but the challenge with being a basketballer, where you're making decent money compared to the average, but you're only ever on a 1 to 3 year thing. So I never felt like I had the confidence to back myself to know that I'd still be getting paid reasonably well 5 years from now to take out a big mortgage or anything like that. So I think anyone who bought a house in the 2000s has been well served across Australia. And we were lucky that we bought the one we did. If we'd been smart, we wouldn't have sold the one we had to buy the one we did. But most people have to sell a house to buy a house, but the people who get rich don't sell a house to buy a house. So anyway, live and learn. But enjoy life. So,
100%. In terms
of balance.
You certainly sound like someone that enjoyed life. Anyone that just I was fortunate enough to have a lot of contacts in Adelaide that shot some stories through, but Rupert Sapwell's a pretty good teller of stories as well in terms of...
Yep, I enjoy his company. Sapper.
Yes, you're a bit of a quirky character. Obviously, there's a story online that goes around about you having a muesli bar in your sock during warm-ups or something. Is that actually true?
I think that's an embellishment by my teammates, but I certainly may have had them at the chair, where beside the court, ready to go after the game. And I like to think I was ahead of my time in terms of sports nutrition as well. We were sponsored by the Pure Milk, who I eventually worked for, and that's why I've got the gig I've got today. Buying milk off farmers. But we had a fridge full of flavoured milks, and bang. But I think nothing of finishing training and knocking off 600 mils of chocolate milk. Boom. In terms of rehydration, all that, and then I'd have another 600 driving home. So maybe that's why my skin folds never quite got to that level of elite. But it's I was always well hydrated and nutritionally balanced, ready to go again. So,
I think everyone's a fan of the chalky milk, and this might explain why you were good with getting the house. There's some claims of a little bit of being frugal. Do you attest to that at all?
No, well, I'd never not pull my weight in a shout, but I mightn't be the first to put my hand up, So I very much have a view of fairness and that sort of thing. I always pull my weight, but do we really need the top of the line of this when we could get something else for this, and it still does the same job? So
you're in that line of work now in terms of getting the best price for what you
can. Well, I am in procurement. That's true.
Fantastic. So obviously you go back to sort of where it started, a bit of work up in Brisbane, in Adelaide. Can you take us through those last couple of years? Because with obviously what we do with this podcast in terms of the trip down memory lane and the time
Yep.
capsule is at some point, obviously, well, not obviously, some people, their career comes to a sudden end through an injury
Yep.
or whatever, or they get the tap on the shoulder.
Yep.
As you're heading to Brisbane, your second last stint in the NBL, are you starting to think about what's next?
Well, I thought about what was next early in my time in Adelaide, to be honest with you. So in that 5-year window, when we were going great, we were the pure milk 36ers. So the general manager, after each game, we'd go upstairs for a meal after the game, and the major sponsor would have people there. So I'd mingle with the guys from National Foods who owned that brand, and so the managing director for South Australia sales said, "You're not going to play forever. Why don't you do some part-time work with us?" And then I made a note here. You said we might talk about this sort of topic. Help others help you. When basketball finishes, what are you going to do? Help others help you. Is that with some degree of education? Is it with some work experience? So I just did 10 hours a week with those guys in the area I eventually got a job in. So, and I did that for 18 months, 2 years. But the other guys got jealous that I wasn't doing as much shooting, and I learned a lesson out of that. And so they were like, "Hey, Phil, Reese, you really should be bloody, shooting when we're shooting in the afternoon," even though I was 30 friggin' 4 with bloody 2 kids.
Yeah.
The 23-year-olds thought it was unfair that I was getting an early moment. But also what I learned about that was perception versus reality. So I had the hump a little bit, I had the shits a little bit with that requirement, because I thought I was setting myself up for the future, and they were trying to take away that the future for me, sort of thing. So, but when I looked at the schedules in that year, had a lot of midweek games. So we were away a lot of Wednesdays anyway. That was the day I was, Tuesday afternoon was when I was working, so we were going to be traveling. When I looked at it over a 3-month window, I was only going to be available to work 10 hours a week, bloody, for like 3 of the weeks. So I went, you know what? Yep, we'll call it. But that, as I said earlier, put me in a place where I had contacts that rewarded me 6 years later. And I would say to players out there, unless you're earning those crazy dollars, NBA, but for a lot of NBL players, you're not going to earn enough to set yourself up, because kids are expensive. Life is expensive. So you want to get a good job if you can after you finish playing. And is there a field that you're interested in? And I know, talking to Jacob Holmes about this, who do I talk to, and that sort of thing. And I'm like, mate, if you need me to talk to anybody, this is crucial, I think, because it also sets you free. If you're not afraid of the future, you can, it's not something that's stuck in your mind. Just focus on basketball, because you're doing 10% over here that'll set you up for 100% over there, further down the path. So when I went to Brisbane the second time round, I just felt I had more to do. I was still enjoying basketball and that sort of thing, and I thought I could still contribute, and that was a great year. Going back to Brisbane, honestly, you talk about reflections. I'm there at practice in that up in Brisbane, and we're talking about how the team had gone the year before, and one of the guys goes, "Yeah, we finished last." I'm like, "What? I've come to a team that finished last. How did that slip through the cracks?" But I hadn't been worried about where they'd been. I was worried about where they were going. So I knew who they were recruiting and who they had. And, Derek Rucker was coming back. I knew Bobby Brannan, and a whole heap of other guys. And I was looking forward, Daniel Egan, so that was interesting. And we're owned by Eddie Groves and ABC before they had a bit of a meltdown. And it was just an incredible year. Joey Wright was the coach, and Joey's ended up here in Adelaide. And I actually got 2 of the girls to do coaching sessions with Joey. different voice, different, attitude. And so Darcy, before she went over, we got her to do, 6 sessions with Joey before she went to the UK to start a professional career. So, and Marnie, just did a few blocks with Joey as well, 6-week blocks sort of thing. So, Joey's been great. I'm really pleased he's ended up living in. Not that we catch up that often in Adelaide for now. So,
no, he's super busy. He's got that. I think it's transition sports.
Yeah.
It's just sort of taken off. We had him on the podcast a few weeks back, and he's loving what he's doing. He said no intention on coaching in the NBL again because he's just loving what he's doing. But you're a little bit ahead of your time, obviously, because we're still talking early 2000s in terms of really setting yourself up and even not setting yourself up, like no pressure on players to be ready when they're out, but at least planting some seeds and opening some doors. Obviously now, like you said, Jacob Holmes and more broadly the Players Association, there's more structure and more encouragement,
a bit more focus, I think. So it's an interesting one, and as I say, it sets you free, because you've got a long life after you stop playing. So
and I think that if you feel that freedom and you feel that confidence, then this is me just putting 2 and 2 together, but then you can come to a decision where you decide on your own that it's time to hang up the boots and it's time to retire because you have that confidence that it's not all going to fall apart. Does that? Because I know that for you it was your choice. Others not so much, but
no, indeed. Well, I also you start your journey getting paid here, and if you can improve and you warrant it, you get up to here, and then you come down the other side. And we had 3 kids, and I was offered the minimum. So I was like, you know what, we can't live on that. So the journey's over. And plus, my body was tired and old, and I wasn't what I was. So it was like it hurt a lot to get up and get going. I was living on anti-inflammatories. I still love the teammates, love the game, still playing over 45s even now.
You played at the Masters or something?
Masters, So here in Adelaide, and but there's a big drop off between 49 and 54 is what I found out in the Masters 3 weeks ago. So there wasn't many nominate. There was only us in the over 45As, so we got gold. But they put us in a pool with the over 30As and the over 40As, and the last time we played pre-COVID, I could hold my own and boom. Hold someone off, grab it, rebound it, put it in. This time, 34-year-old people just go, I appreciate you got your hand on me, but whoop. And so I was, it was a bit of an eye-opener for me. So I'm like, well, what happened to old man's strength? That's been and gone apparently. I'm on to another stage. But so.
No, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I will ask just because, again, we have some real diehards on here that love their local stuff as well. When you were playing pro, did you also play in the off-season obviously you mentioned early days Seabull, but did you play state league over in Adelaide or up in Brisbane? Who did you play for in those?
Here in Adelaide, I played for Woodville Warriors, and KB was coaching, and that's Kevin Brooks, and we won the championship here in Adelaide. That was a highlight. Up in Brisbane, in the early 90s, I played for the Maine Tigers up there, and Gordy McLeod was the assistant coach one year there, and I played with him, and we won that, the Wednesday night comp up there. And I also played for the Eastern Mavericks here in Adelaide and the Forestville Eagles for a season for each of those. So, but
and who did the girls play for?
Forestville Eagles here in Adelaide. Eagles. So they came through there and that sort of thing. So, but I was very lucky with, the coaches, and I collected anecdotes and that sort of thing along the way. And, I often, when I watch basketball, some of the things that Steve Breeny, I thought was a great basketball mind, he gave me was good or great. You can always box out. You can always run the floor hard. You can always, go to the offensive boards. You can always talk on D. You can always, So if you can do all those things, you'll have a good game typically.
Yeah.
Now, if your shot's going in, you'll have a great game. So that was one of his little, things I got from him that I've really pushed, wherever I get the opportunity. Good or great, you can control a lot that makes good, and great comes along when it comes along. So, and the other simple one was that he gave me, and I constantly watch games and look at, there's 5 of them and 5 of us. So if you find yourself alone, someone's free. Do you know what I mean? Like constantly scan. Well, here's my guy, 5 of them, 5 of us.
That's a great simple way to think.
Very simple. If you're on your own, someone's free.
Yeah.
So
100%. And the only other thing, one of the last things is, and it's not to be neglected, is you went to a world championship. So in 1994, and that leads me to one of the questions that was sent through is, so you were third centre there behind Ray Bonner and Mark Bradkey. Who was, if you can't pick one, some of your greatest challenges or your greatest opponents, the players you found the toughest? Was it a Ray Bonner or a Mark Bradkey, or was it the Alabama Slammer? Who was it?
There was plenty of players at different points in my 15, or
it's a long
17 seasons. So ACL would be a name that no one would throw up very often. He was a massive American that came out here. I think it was only here for a year, but I didn't have much for him. I reckon I got 5 fouls in under 8 minutes, I reckon. When we played him one time, I had nothing. Boom. But fortunately, he didn't stay for long, so I was well pleased with that. But, Ray was always a hard unit to match up against. He was just physically strong constantly. Dorji before him, or at the same time, was a long centre. But I reckon I started to get the better of Dorji over the journey. Ray was tough. Who else? Everyone was tough. I just felt if I could hold my man off the boards and not let them dominate in their whatever they were doing, I'd do my job and then hopefully free up my teammates down the other end by the end of it all. Scott Fisher, he was tough, and I mentioned Daryl Pearce and the old Albert Park in Victoria. I once went in there and Fish was bloody, he had a setup where he was covering about 3 courts where he was just lathered in sweat, just shooting mid-range, get the rebound, run to the next, dribble to the next spot, shoot a mid-range, go to the next basket, shoot it. And again, I was like, oh, God, I'm not sure I want to be good if that's what it takes, So good luck to him and all he achieved. And
now if we bring it back to sort of finish up on the modern era, is there anyone any player, or maybe it's just a team that you really enjoy watching in the NBL?
I like watching, big centers do what big centers do. I mean, I'm enjoying seeing Aaron Baines out here, and even bloody getting suspended for 5 weeks, not that I ever was, but, he's passionate and, and he does the simple things well. He's in terms of right now. I love watching. He just did 450 games for the Wildcats.
Oh, Wagstaff, yes.
Wagstaff, he seems to have dropped off a little bit now, but that's age, But in his day, he reminded me of Rupert Sapwell. He was do it all, So shoot the 3, chase the ball, just did simple things really well. So and Bryce Cotton, I could watch him just light it up all day and night, So
I'd imagine you would have liked to play like a Sean Redditch.
Oh, I'll tell you, I think I may have played against Sean Redditch. He was pretty tough. So I'm not wrapping him up too much. But Josh Childress, when he came out played for Joey here in Adelaide, that was a team that were incredibly unlucky not to win it all. And what I would say about that was that Josh was doing the stuff that needed to be done. He was filling in gaps. So I was on the end of the baseline one game watching them, and I don't know, and Mitch Creek was getting beaten on a spin move by the big guy. Now he was fighting hard because he's a strong unit himself, but Josh would come off his player and be that second rotation, and and I don't know. That's what smart professionals do. Do you know what I mean? That's what makes great teams great teams. It's not about the one-on-one. Oh, I'll take my man. It's about the first rotation. It's about the second rotation. It's about knowing each other's role. And on defense, you've just got to keep flying through those rotations. And most teams break down after one or two.
Yeah.
That's the thing that frustrates me. And you go, oh my God, that guy just drove from the 3-point line and smashed a dunk. And you go, and he's not very quick. Where was everybody else?
Yeah, just staying at home. Yeah.
And I know they go, oh, everyone's shooting the 3-pointer well, blah, blah, blah. But everyone's smashing 100% of dunks.
That's right.
And they're still missing a fair share of 3-pointers. So perhaps we should have had the rotation. So I like seeing teams that, move the ball well and help each other on D and then get out and run. Yeah. And that's what the 36ers had in that era. And and that team that Joey nearly took to winning it all with Josh Childress, they played well and played hard. So
Now, well, for anyone listening, there's plenty of footage of that online, so you can go back and check that stuff out. Look, thanks so much for your time today. It's been fantastic. You're a great storyteller. There's probably going to be a bunch of invites for Sportsman's Nights or something now, because you're very good at and very generous too, because it's one thing to have the story, it's another to fill us in, because as fans, it's sort of what we live for, is we love the game, but it's then getting to know, the human element. And that's what Jacob Holmes would always talk about, was, getting to know the human element of the players and, what they've got going on in the background. And it just creates a whole nother appreciation. As I always say, we always learn better through shared stories. So thanks again for coming on.
No worries. Thank you.
And have a great rest of the year. Have a great Christmas. It's not too far around the corner now, only less than 8 weeks. So
no, it absolutely is. I've got a whole heap of Christmas shows around Australia to get to, where I'll be talking to farmers and enjoying their company and calling it work.
Yeah, fantastic. Sounds good. All right, Paul. Thanks so much, mate.
No worries. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay. Cheers.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe for future episodes.